Four Arab nations will continue their embargo against Qatar after Doha rejected their demands. Foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE and Egypt gathered in Cairo as an extended deadline expired. They said they're disappointed and are considering further action. All right, let's talk now to Arsalan Iftikhar on Skype from Chicago. He's a senior fellow at Georgetown University about this very subject. And we seem to have a diplomatic stalemate, don't we, with the four foreign ministers basically wagging their finger at Qatar and saying, you're not taking us terribly seriously, we'll maintain the measures that we have, we'll keep them in place.
Yeah, Martine, I think that it comes as no surprise to any global observer that the Qataris did not acquiesce, to the silly demands of these four Arab nations. It's funny that, looking at the list of demands, one of the demands was that Qatar stop interfering in the sovereignty of other nations, which is exactly what these demands seek to do. And so it's, a protracted stalemate now, and I think that we're only going to see a détente once other regional players like Turkey and Kuwait and others try to mediate the situation.
Indeed. I mean, most international players agree that the demands that have come from the four Arab countries are neither reasonable nor actionable, which is the prerequisite that was set by the United States. But what do you think is likely to break this diplomatic conflict? Because at the moment what we have is a stalemate and it's frozen. So it's going to take something, isn't it, in order to break this standoff?
It is, Martine. And again, as I mentioned, I think it's going to be key regional players. I'm guessing Turkey is probably going to be one of the key major players in mediating this détente. I think that Kuwait also within the GCC has already made overtures, to try and, make a diplomatic solution to this. It becomes a little more complicated because even though Qatar is geographically a tiny nation, most people know it to be one of the richest nations in the world, and it also houses, the U.S. Central Command at Al Udeid Air Base, and so there is a great strategic importance to Qatar, not only within the Gulf region, but also across the world as well.
Well, the most visible intervention at the moment does seem to be coming from Germany with its foreign minister in the region. It's interesting that you don't think necessarily that an important contribution can be made by the United States, by the Secretary of State.
No, I do not. I think that with Donald Trump in the White House, I think that it would be intellectually dishonest to say that the United States can play any meaningful broker because of Donald Trump's own schizophrenic foreign policy. I think the key players will come from the EU, like Germany, like France, perhaps. I believe that Turkey and others within the region are going to play key roles. And I think the United States is actually, with Donald Trump, really might only fan the flames of ignorance, and schizophrenia when it comes to a meaningful political, solution to this situation.
All right, going back to the four Arab nations, their declaration made from Cairo, it does seem very much as though they've boxed themselves in. When you say that something is completely non-negotiable, that was repeated again by the Egyptian foreign minister. Earlier, it had been said by the Saudi foreign minister. They are boxed in now. An elegant face-saving mechanism now has to be devised in order for this, for there to be some movement on this crisis.
You're absolutely right, Martine. And I think it's important to also see who the messengers are, in this situation. If you look at the list of countries that have, blockaded Qatar or sanctioned Qatar, we have, secular autocrats on one end, and we have unaccountable royal monarchs on the other, many of whom have many human rights issues and, questionable ties to, their financial and political ideologies to, extremist organizations. And so I think that, it is not conducive to any sort of, meaningful global conversation when we try to essentially, marginalize a country's sovereign powers under international law to do their own foreign policy as they deem fit, to monitor their own media outlets as they deem fit. Again, if these countries are going to try to export, human rights and international law to Qatar and other places, they should look within their own borders as well, and deal with some of these troubling issues as well.
Okay, Arsalan Iftikhar, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you, Martine.